I'm Brian Scordato, and this is the Idea to Startup podcast, a podcast that's been called, quote, easily 10 times more useful than my MBA, which probably says more about higher education than our pod, but it was a nice review. We're going to start sending the pod along with some deeper content each week, so if you're a power listener of Idea to Startup, head to gettacklebox.beehive.com or the link in the show notes. Beehive is spelled a bit wildly, so it's gettacklebox.beehiiv.com. On to it. Today, and over the next few weeks, we're going to dive into the always work and never work lists and pull out a few of my favorite residents from each. If you aren't familiar with the always work and never work lists, these are lists I've been keeping for nearly a decade now at Tacklebox. The boundaries for the always work and never work list are strict, and I bet you can guess them. But for the folks sitting in the back of the class, the stuff on the always work list always works, and the stuff on the never work list never does. Are there exceptions? No. That's the whole point of the list. This keeps them tight and tidy and wildly useful. Admission to either list is harder than admission into Harvard, and we don't let in legacies, so don't even try Lexington Pennyworth IV. Anyway, the point of these lists is simple, but maybe counterintuitive. The always work and never work lists are about luck. Using these firm, reliable methods gives you the best chance at the least firm, seemingly unreliable part of building a business: luck. I like to think we're all living one version of, say, 1,000 Possible Lives. It's similar to that book, The Midnight Library, if you've ever read it, and if you haven't, you should. The goal with the lists is to find the methods that'll give you a chance at being successful in 999 of those 1,000 lives. And doing that will give you the best chance at what we call at Tacklebox, the luck amplifier. The equation for your startup success is the sum of your decisions times your luck amplifier. So, maximizing the quality of your base decisions creates more opportunities for the luck amplifier to kick in. Most first-time founders view luck as a thing that they have no control over, but good founders recognize luck for what it is: a specific, measurable variable that gets tacked onto every action you take. Luck is a strategy, not a mystery. It's math, not magic. You can, and should, build, optimize, and script luck. And we will in an episode in a few weeks called How to Build Luck Amplifiers. For today, though, we'll focus on one core item off the always work list that'll anchor that startup equation. Last time we talked about the always work and never work lists, someone reached out and asked if these methods eventually stopped working. They said that surely if everyone who listens to the pod started doing them, the unique value would disappear, right? And yeah, the more mainstream a method gets, the less differentiation you'll get from using it. Even the best methods have shelf lives. Just look at the new Brad Pitt-George Clooney movie on Netflix. It's unwatchable, and I used to think I'd be happy watching those two hound dogs banter on screen about anything. But the stuff we'll talk about today will work for you because it's stuff that, even if 100 people know about it, 95 of them won't do it. I know this because I've told hundreds of our entrepreneurs to do it, and they're all great, and they still usually don't. So you've just got to be one of the 5 that do to see that enormous value. Enough rambling. Let's get to the thing that always works. And we'll do it after a word from a new sponsor I'm very excited to be working with: Accelerate Dev, spelled XLR8 dev.com. As you know, I'm picky about our pod's advertisers. That is why I'm excited to introduce Accelerate Dev, spelled XLR8 dev.com. They solve a massive problem for our non-technical listeners: getting the first version of your product out on time and on budget before you raise funds or hire a CTO. What separates Accelerate is that on time and on budget piece. This might sound like table stakes, but bloated scope and budget is nearly always the reason outsourced projects fail. First-time founders just aren't equipped to manage a technical product. Having Accelerate founder Jaden and the rest of the team focused on strategy, making sure every dollar and ounce of effort is focused on getting a useful product out fast, is a game changer. You'll have a partner who's built dozens of products on time and on budget, actively coaching you. Accelerate can build apps or websites. They can salvage a partial product you had someone build on Fiverr. They're based entirely in the US, and most importantly, They can do it all on time and on budget so that you can start generating customer feedback and revenue. Contact Jaden, Jaden, at XLR, the number 8, dev.com. Mention idea to startup for our special listener deal on building your first product. Time to get something up and out. Back to it. A thing that always works. The 5-minute list. Part 1. The Revenge of the Sand. In one of the first ever episodes of Idea to Startup, where I sound like a totally different person who's somehow both more dramatic and less interesting, I talked about the sand and stones of startup work. I'll put it in the show notes. It's not as bad as I'm making it out to be. The sand and stone metaphor is a common one. The idea is to visualize the time you work on your business as being contained in something that looks like an oversized mason jar. That jar holds all the time you spend on your startup. What you put in the jar are the two types of work most founders do early on, represented by sand and stones. Stonework, or what Cal Newport calls deep work, requires longer, unbroken chunks of time. A 3-hour block to build out a high-level customer acquisition plan for customer interviews, or 5 hours to synthesize those interviews and build a customer journey map for your customer's current process. Actions up top, emotions beneath. If you have 10 hours to work on your startup in a week and you want to get 3 stones done, you need to find 3 hour-long blocks. Those stones are going to take up most of the jar, and that's a good thing. Stonework is often uncomfortable and usually proactive. It's also unnatural if you haven't worked on a startup before. Sandwork, on the other hand, is reactive. It doesn't require big chunks of time, and it tends to have short, superficial, but rewarding feedback loops. Answering emails, posting about your business on social media, setting up an LLC, creating a business plan, all that junk. It's usually described as the comfortable stuff. The let's have an extra slice of pumpkin pie on the couch after Thanksgiving, after you've already changed into your stretchy Vuori sweatpants of entrepreneurship work. The right approach is, obviously, to maximize the stonework and let the sandwork fill in the gaps. But most entrepreneurs with jobs take the opposite approach. It's hard to hold 3 uninterrupted hours, and it's harder to work on the deep stuff during them. Plowing through emails and checking off surface level stuff feels more productive because that's what productive is for non-entrepreneurs. So that's what they do. We've always tried to help our founders build systems around the stonework. Startups are about contrast, what you do that no one else does. Stonework, the uncomfortable stuff, is always the answer for contrast. Anyway, you're probably nodding along. Yes. Stonework, deep work. You buy it. You struggle holding that time, but you're really going to try harder to do it, Brian. You really will. Maybe you even wrote yourself an email during that section that said, hold Saturday morning for stonework, damn it. And that is great, and you should do it. But don't beat yourself up yet, because today's method isn't about stones or holding time for them. It's about the revenge of the sand. I continue to work with a handful of the best founders from Tacklebox after they've outgrown the program. This is usually in an advisory capacity, so the types of meetings I have shift from hyper-specific one-on-ones to less frequent, broader catch-ups, usually over coffee or lunch. A few years ago, I went to the bathroom during one of these lunches and came back to see the founder deep in something on her phone. What was she doing? I asked. 5-minute list, she replied. She loved the sand and stone method, she explained, but she'd realized that it was often impractical. She had a job and a family. She'd only get maybe 1 3-hour block each week for deep work. So she tried to figure out how to create deep work in these smaller pockets of time. She needed the sand to not be frivolous and unuseful, so she'd started taking 5 to 15-minute blocks of time extremely seriously. And to make sand strategic, she said, she had to rebrand it. She called her new, small, hyper-effective blocks of time Pebbles. Pebbles weren't rocks, but they certainly weren't sand. They were substantial. They moved her forward. The key to Pebbles, she said, are transitions. The reason the default when you had 5 minutes to work on your startup was to answer emails was because answering emails was the easiest thing to transition in and out of, she said. You could pull up emails, you could answer one, and you could get back to your life with zero friction. Same with social media or iMessage or whatever. So, she said, she built a system that focused on transitions Being able to go from ordering your Starbucks to 7 minutes of deep work while they made your latte and then back out again. The start of that system was to pick a big, hairy, intimidating topic she'd naturally been avoiding and to break it down into 5, 10, and 15-minute tasks every Sunday. These tasks were then put into her notes app. It was critical, she said, that all those 5, 10, and 15-minute slots of random time throughout the week were focused on the same overarching task or theme. This pulled them together into a bigger block in her mind. Her subconscious would work on them in the background. If her Pebbles jumped around from answering emails to social posts to marketing to sales, the system crumbled. At first, she said she'd pick stuff she liked doing for the Pebble focused, but she realized a much better approach was to pick stuff she hated for those blocks of time. That allowed her to use her uninterrupted stone time every Sunday morning from 6 to 10 a.m. on stuff she really liked doing. She also said she felt an enormous sense of pride when she'd spent a random 10 minutes doing something that made her uncomfortable, but finishing it. She also noted how important scripting the first part of any task was. If you've got 5 minutes, you can't spend 3 minutes figuring out what to do. So each 5-minute task had a very clear, quote, start by doing X to accelerate that transition. The end of each 15-minute session was scripted too. The prompt before you moved on was always something like, quote, end the task by noting the next step you need to take and what you need to think about until the next 5-minute block of time. I reached out to her for this episode to see if she still did this, and she said yes, absolutely. I asked what her current Pebbles were focused on, and she said sales. Always sales these days. Figuring out Pebbles has been, she said, the most important part of her business. And it is an amazing example of one of my favorite approaches in life. Notice something small and overlooked, but important, and take it extremely seriously. Your subconscious. A quick note on the subconscious before we jump into how to build your own 5-minute list. I've talked about this before, but your subconscious loves a job, an open loop. It's called the Zeigarnik effect. Basically, that we remember unfinished tasks much better than we remember finished ones. Your brain is antsy and hates when things aren't settled. It'll work on open loops in the background until they're closed. It's why you remember every detail of Pachinko while you're reading it, but couldn't tell someone the plot 2 weeks after you're done. Your brain also likes structure. X is for Y. So, when you set up 5-minute lists, your brain will be working on those tasks in the background while also searching for the X for Y opportunity. It'll search for 5-minute pockets of time. It'll be excited to work on this open loop. The 5-minute list goes with our natural inertia. It swims with the current, and that is why it works. Now, let's implement it. Part 2. Building your 5-minute list. A quick note on the name of the 5-minute list. I like it. It's catchy. But practically, you should build tasks for 5, 10, 15-minute slots. And maybe you'll see that this expands all the way up to scripted hours. It's flexible and up to you. But if you convert 2 random 15-minute blocks of time each day, you're adding 3.5 hours of startup work to your week. You can't afford not to do that. So let's get started on specifics. I'll be the guinea pig. The high-level steps are 1. Pick the topic you are uncomfortable with, but when you write a story about your success in 12 months, plays a massive role. 2. Write out a long-form, descriptive version of that success. 3. Feed that into your favorite AI with our set of prompts attached. 4. Translate it into a part of your weekly reflection. On we go. Step 1. Pick an uncomfortable thing you need to do to be successful. Luckily, this one's going to jump out at you. It's the obvious one. Don't overthink it. For me, this is podcast growth. I love that the pod has grown organically to this point, that everyone listening right now probably got a rec or saw us posted somewhere. You're here of your own volition. This isn't a shotgun wedding. But when I write my story of success in 1 year, I need there to be like 3 times as many of you. Maybe 5. Ideally, 10. That drives everything. So it's time to push on it a bit. And sure, if you wanted to leave a 5-star review and refer us to a friend, I'd be thrilled, but I need a strategy, and the 5-minute list is the perfect place to create one. So the 5-minute list will belong to podcast growth. Step 2, write out long form what success looks like. For me, that includes who is listening, what problems we help them solve, why they're so excited about it, and why it's obvious they should share it. I won't read this whole paragraph now, but it's important you type it out. Spend some time on it. Describing success is hard, and luckily, this is going to be an iterative process for you, as you'll see with the next step. Once you get that success paragraph written, you hit step 3. Feed it into your favorite AI. I'm a Claude guy at the moment. I'll put a link in the show notes, but I know people like ChatGPT and whatever else is popular when you listen to this. I think they're all basically the same, especially for something like this. Copy paste that paragraph that you just wrote in and explain to AI what you're trying to do. Here is how I started. Quote, below is my definition of success as it relates to podcast growth. I'm looking to grow the podcast in a bunch of targeted ways, so could you come up with 20 ideas that would hit the audience I've described? Nope, I don't want to have guests and I don't want to go on other people's shows. I want hub and spoke strategies, ways to grow through hubs that have organized my customers already. It gave a decent answer, but I kept pushing. I asked for 40 more examples, then 40 more after that, asking it to think about how other businesses and other industries have grown. I added boundaries, approaches I liked and approaches that I didn't. I ended up with a list of 10 strategies that matched what we do and how we've grown in the past. Then, I asked Claude to break this into 15-minute tasks, complete with a sentence on how I should get started. I'd explained the whole sand and stone and pebbles thing, and Claude, not surprisingly, got it. I added a bunch of current tasks to show exactly how I like things broken up and worded. We went back and forth a few times, but landed on a set of tasks I like. Then I exported them to Notion and popped them into our old friend, Linguini. And now I have 10 strategies broken up in 15-minute chunks that I can attack in the margins over the next few months. My random slots of time are owned entirely by podcast growth, and I love it. The first strategy was to reach out to college entrepreneurship clubs. I am a few weeks into it, and pod growth is noticeably up. Things on the always work list always work. The end. Coworking. Entrepreneurship is incredibly lonely. Both the fact that you're doing it alone, but maybe more the fact that if you don't do everything, nothing happens. The work itself is lonely. This is the biggest shift from being a non-entrepreneur, the sheer weight of the required proactiveness. And it's not just that if you aren't proactive, good stuff doesn't happen. If you aren't proactive, bad stuff happens instantly. Your good work is undone. Entrepreneurship isn't just pushing a rock up a snowy mountain, it's doing it with skis on. When you stop pushing, you start sliding backwards. I've always tried to help founders find other founders to combat the actual loneliness side of entrepreneurship, and with freelancers or folks off of Fiverr to combat the work loneliness side. AI has changed the second. This isn't going to be some her-level companion, but it is going to do work for you for free. Write out a story of what you want done and have it put into chunks that fit your workflow and work style. The work will get less lonely. The 5-minute list is a thing that always works. Flip your random scrolling and email answering to targeted work on a hard problem you need to solve to grow like you're capable of. Do it twice a day and your business will change. It always works. That is why it's on the list. And why Lexington Pennyworth IV still isn't. Beat it, chap. This was the Idea to Start a Podcast, brought to you by Tacklebox. If you're stuck on customer interviews, join our customer interview kickoff workshop. Head to gettacklebox.com/workshops and sign up, and we'll see you there. Have a great week.